The historian, Malcolm X's dear friend for many years, seems to share this opinion concerning the people behind the murder.
I do not believe the jealous idiots within the Nation of Islam had the intellectual capacity to understand the depth of a Malcolm X, the direction of a Malcolm X. So therefore, their hands may have killed him, but the direction of their hands, the intent, came from outside.
As to the true killers, many people, from the black Muslims to the highest state authorities, could be implicated. 4 trails keep coming back. The New York Police Department. The living proof is Gene Roberts, the informer we've been following through this whole film. The CIA, which was very suspicious of the powerful links established by Malcolm X with African leaders. The FBI. Hoover and his staff were looking very closely into the friendship of the country's 2 enemies number 1, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And finally, the black Muslim leaders themselves.
I do know that my father feared Malcolm after he broke with the Nation of Islam. He feared the damage that Malcolm could do to his work, to his many years of work. And I know that he would be relieved to hear that Malcolm was dead. I know that. But to say he is involved or ordered it, I can't say that.
I am firmly convinced from everything I've seen, and I don't say I'm a prophet or could see backwards or know all the truth about everything in the world, but from what I understand, I do know, I think this was a spasmodic, spontaneous act by these 5 men out of the Newark Mosque who thought they were avenging Elijah Muhammad.
Now, one thing, though, I do want us to be clear on, it wasn't so much Islam, but clearly Malcolm's internationalism clearly played was a major motivating force that explained why the Bureau did not want to pull back some of the things that they were doing behind closed doors and flaming the fire. And of course, it was also Malcolm's domestic radicalism. In other words, there were many things that Malcolm was doing that were deemed subversive, that was deemed threatening to the United States government, to the Johnson administration, to Hoover's mentality and the mentality of members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, as well as CIA.
Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were about to join forces and form a coalition. I saw Malcolm X speak in Selma, Alabama on February 4, 1965. He was ready to join the civil rights movement. He spoke at Brown's Chapel. He met with Coretta King and Andy Young that day. He came to support King's movement, but King was in jail and could not meet with him. The week before Malcolm died, Clarence Jones had dinner with him in New York City. They agreed on an agenda where King and Malcolm would come together. They agreed to disagree about self-defense, which was still a point of difference between them. But Malcolm X was going to organize the northern cities, and Martin Luther King was going to continue organizing in the South. And those 2 guys coming together in the winter of 1965 had to be J. Edgar Hoover's worst nightmare.
As to the question of which of these assumptions seems to be the most convincing, one might be tempted to answer none and all of them. But we can suggest that authorities at various levels all took part in the elimination of a black man whose intransigence and integrity obviously disturbed the order white men had established. But as long as the archives are not opened, none of these high-ranking state servants need worry. Let's remember that in the 1950s, more especially in the southern United States, 100 years after the abolition of slavery, segregation was still in force. Rosa Parks refused to leave her seat on a bus to a white man. The movement for civil rights was born, and the minister Martin Luther King preached the principle of nonviolence. Malcolm X preferred to adopt the more radical position of the black Muslims. He rejected the idea of integration and brandished violence as an answer to stubborn racism. Coming back from Africa in 1964, he broke away from the black Muslims. He realized that the black people in the United States are not the only victims of Americanism. and that a direct contact between 22 million African Americans and the Africans of the Black continent is essential. The fight must leave the field of civil rights for the higher field of human rights. If Malcolm X's political maturity made him announce loud and clear that a non-bloody revolution remained a possibility in the United States, it is with the same pride that he said that only justice and brotherhood will prevent future fights. The American Census Office announces that in 2050, not that far away, white people will become a minority in the United States. The beginning of this 21st century has seen something really new. For the first time, there was a non-white candidate running for the presidency. The African-American Malcolm X has truly imprinted his name in Black people's world history.